Hello and welcome to Crafting Your Brewery for SALSA Success webinar. We're pleased that you can join us. As some of you are already aware, that you will know that we have been running a series of SALSA webinars that explores different aspects of the SALSA scheme, and this is the fifth in the series of webinars. If you've missed any though, don't worry, you can still catch up as these are still available. And you'll find the links to them on LinkedIn and on our socials as well. Just to let you know that I've muted your microphones and cameras. So, if you've got any questions, then please use the chat button at the end, as we've got a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So just to introduce myself, my name is Alison Sawyer, and I've worked in a number of aspects in the food and drink industry for over 20 years. I'm a SALSA auditor and mentor, and I've worked with the SALSA scheme for over 5 years. So you're also joined by some other members of the SALSA team, which includes Sarah Hall, the certification manager, and Sarah Robbins, the marketing manager. SALSA membership has always meant access to support to create safe food and drink systems. And these webinars are designed to support you and your journey through SALSA, and they'll be recorded as well. So just to let you know that it is being recorded today. So you can watch it again if you'd like to. But like I said, we've got time to stay on the line at the end of the webinar to answer any questions that you may have. So just to go through the topics for today then, so we're going to be going through HACCP, cleaning of kegs and casks, finished product testing, shelf life, specifications, and top tips for success. So the purpose of today's webinar then is we just wanted to share with you that we've been doing some in-depth analysis of the audits which have been carried out over the last 12 months. And we wanted to share this with you so that you can gain a better understanding of particular areas where breweries are getting either non-conformances or PCAs, partial compliance with actions. But the purpose of today's webinar then is to go through the top non-conformances raised within the beer sector, so that you can gain a better understanding of the expectations around the areas where non-conformances are raised, and then also just to give you some top tips for success. So we're just going to go through now just the requirements of the SALSA auditors and mentors. So auditors and mentors then, just to let you know, we have to be registered with the IFST, the Institute of Food Science and Technology, and we have to be a member of this institute. And then also we have to we have to register once we're a member to be a registered professional of auditors and mentors. And we're then approved by SALSA, and we go through a rigorous interview process to be approved by SALSA. But the benefits to you as kind of breweries is that you know that you are getting experts with specific training and knowledge. So I'm just going to explain now just a little bit about CASMark and how SALSA linked in with CASMark. So SALSA have nearly 200 brewery members. Some are just brewing beer, and some brew and pack into casks and then send to suitable. So some just brew the beer and pack into casks, and some send out to packers and bottling and canneries. So some brewers do both. So they will brew the beer, they will then pack into various formats, including kegs, casks, cans, bottles. And we've also got a number of contract packers as well. But as you can see, that we've got a number of breweries, and we've achieved, and some have achieved SALSA through a scheme which we have called the SALSA Plus Beer Standard. And as a brewery member of SALSA, you don't have to have the SALSA Plus beer, although you may be asked to by some of your customers. Some breweries decide to stay with the SALSA Food Standard, and this is for most food and drink companies. This is relevant to food and drink companies. But like I say, we do have we do have a standard which is specifically for beer, but you do not have to have that. You can just go for the food and drink standard. But the reason that Beer Plus scheme came about was because Caskmark identified that there was an opportunity to align the standard while still keeping it relevant for the brewing industry. And what Caskmark identified was that there were some inconsistencies with the quality of beer. The breweries were getting a bad, and this resulted in some breweries getting a bad reputation. So these opportunities then were around understanding traceability of beer, reducing waste, and also the standard was creating a standard that was more relevant to breweries. So with the Beer Plus standard, there are specific clauses within the standard that are specifically tailored towards breweries and beer making. In the interpretation guide for the food standard, there are also comments in there that again make it relevant to breweries as well. So it's not about adding more red tape then, it's just by having this beer standard, it's just about enhancing what you already do, which is creating fantastic beer and cider, at the same time as maintaining high standards that we know you are all so proud of and your customers love. So when we're talking about the different schemes then, there's two schemes which are relevant to breweries, which I've already mentioned. Both the food and drink scheme and the SALSA Plus beer scheme, they've got 4 distinct sections within the scheme, which is when you have your audit, you're audited against these 4 different sections, with additional requirements in the Plus beer scheme, which, as I've said, are specifically relevant to breweries to maintain quality. And SALSA have been working with BFBI, and now, rather than having a separate audit, you can do this as part of the SALSA audit with prior arrangement with the SALSA office. And this forms section 5 of the standard. So if you want to go for the BFBI, then you can, there will be a section 5 in the audit standard for that audit. However, what we're going to do for the next part of the presentation is we're going to focus on the non-conformances that have been raised in the last 12 months. There's some key themes here. So just talking about the non-conformances then. So we've done this analysis of non-conformances of the members that are that brew beer. And breweries, what we've noticed, are getting more than 10 non-conformances in their audit, and also getting more than 10, or they could be getting more than 10 partial compliances with actions. Both of these need to be closed out within 28 days. And this is considerably more than other food and drink categories. So we're seeing a trend across some of the clauses within the standard, which is one of the main reasons for doing these webinars. The previous webinars have been on traceability, food defence plans, which also includes the raw material risk assessment. So please do look back on these through LinkedIn and in our social media pages, as these will really help you understand how you can get this right, so that you can be compliant for your next audit, because some of those non-conformances are within this top 10 as well. So we're just going to talk about HACCP now, and this is where we are seeing non-conformances in breweries in particular. So we just want to make it really clear and simple and easy for you to go through it. So SALSA clauses are written so the HACCP section of the SALSA standard, the clauses within that have been written to ensure that you comply with the law. So it's really important that you are compliant against all of the HACCP clauses, because HACCP is a legal requirement. And the law states that HACCP systems should be based on HACCP principles. And it also states that the team or person responsible for the development of the HACCP must have adequate training in HACCP principles. So as you will probably know from looking at the HACCP clauses, that forms both of those elements are within the clauses of the HACCP section. So if we have a look at these in a little bit more detail then, so clause 2.1 is the HACCP scope. And this means that you need to make sure that you have clearly documented the scope of the HACCP. So think about who is on the HACCP team and what training have they got. Because again, the law says that you need to have adequate training in HACCP principles. So you need to demonstrate this within your audit by showing your training certificate in HACCP, but also being able to demonstrate your understanding of HACCP. So what hazards are considered? So remember, it is food safety only. So do not include health and safety and do not include quality. It is just food safety that is in relation to HACCP. So describe the starting point and the end point in your HACCP study as well. So when it comes to your HACCP study, do you have any stage in your HACCP, in your process, where you're sending products to a bottling plant and then the bottles come back to you? So include all of this within the scope of your study. So that kind of brings me on to the next point, which is, are there any outsourced processes such as bottling? So just if there is, make sure that you mention that within the scope. And then document the product groups and the processes. So, mention the product groups that you're making, name some of the processes as well. So milling, mashing, lautering, boiling, etc. So make sure that you've got your HACCP training certificates available to show your auditor, and also detail this in the scope of the HACCP. So put a list in the scope of your HACCP, list who is on your HACCP team, list what training they have got, and make sure you've got certificates available to show the auditor. And if they've got any industry expertise or experience, so say they've been in the brewing industry for the last 10 years, then, make sure that that's recorded as well, because it's good practice to have the name, what level of training they've got, and also the industry expertise, and what departments are they responsible for. So I know you might be a small brewery, but who looks after production? Who looks after the food safety side? Is anybody looking after maintenance or hygiene? So remember to put those key kind of departments on there as well, so you can demonstrate that you've got a multidisciplinary team. But remember the HACCP team, so it should be multidisciplinary, your HACCP team as well. So just moving on then to the product description, because again, that is another area where we're getting some non-conformances. So here you're expected to describe the product in detail, and the purpose of this is for you to understand what makes the beer or cider safe or unsafe. It's easy to make the assumption that beer is a low-risk product and that pathogens do not grow in it. However, it's not always the case. So pathogens may be able to grow in beers with a low ABV of less than 2.5%, and if the pH is greater than 4. And with a number of low ABV fruit beers on the market, this needs to be considered as part of your HACCP. Also think about allergens. So again, it's easy to group gluten as one allergen. However, the legislation does state that you need to identify on the label where there is a risk of cross-contamination, and also that you need to label the allergen to consider, is there a risk? So for example, is it wheat or barley, which falls under the gluten category? So you need to name those specific sources of the gluten. So these would both need to be declared separately if you're using both. So be aware of the legal regulations and the industry codes of practice that are relevant to your product, and list these to demonstrate that these are being considered within your HACCP scope. But so list your legislation in your scope, but just have a separate section for your product description. So this brings me now onto the intended use, which falls under clause 2.3. So Document the product, use and the user. So take into account the final consumer, including who your product is suitable for and who it's not suitable for. So this is where you consider the vulnerable groups. So vulnerable groups being the young, elderly, pregnant ladies, immunocompromised and allergy sufferers. So immunocompromised or allergy sufferers and people who are already ill. So describe how the products are sold, stored and displayed. How are they used and how are they consumed? So what labelling information is provided? So when we're thinking about the intended use, this section is important because when you come on to do your risk assessment of your hazards, where you consider the likelihood of a hazard happening and the severity, knowing who your intended user is will help you assess the risk and the severity to the intended user. So, think about as well when it comes to the product. So how will people use your product? If it's used in a pub, might the chef use it to make a gravy for a pie that, a family could come in and eat? So think about all of these things. So, HACCP, so when we're thinking about section 2.14, so again, this is another kind of non-conformance that we're seeing raised within the breweries. So it's part of the UK legislation that you should review your HACCP where there are any changes to the product, processing methods, equipment, raw materials or suppliers of raw materials and packaging methods or distribution. And so the legislation says that you must do it when changes occur, but the SALSA standard says you must do your HACCP review at least annually or when changes occur. So make sure that you are carrying out a full review of your HACCP. There's some really good pointers on the interpretation guides on here. But, think about, is it where, if you've got, we all know that in the beer industry, there's just a few key raw material suppliers, so it's unlikely that you change your raw material suppliers that often. But think about new products that are in product that you're developing. So could these be adding a new hazard that has not been thought of previously, or the same raw materials from a different supplier? So could that same raw material supplier be treating the product before it comes to you in a different way from your previous supplier? So it could be that they're using a different metal detectable test size pieces. They could be handling different allergens potentially. So all of these could affect the safety of your products. So think about all of these points, variations between production shifts, day and night and weekend, and any batch runs. So, packaging, storage and distribution methods or conditions as well. So could this, has there been any changes and could this affect things? So you need to do a review, even if it's just to say, we've thought about it and there's no risk. So yeah, it's also a good idea to review your HACCP if you've had any of the following things happen. So things like customer complaints. So if you're seeing a spike in customer complaints or a particular trend from a customer or a particular trend in the product type from different customers, then always have a look at your HACCP system just to see what has changed and actually, are we missing something? If you've had any enforcement authority records, so if your environmental health officers come on site and has raised any issues then that are significant to food safety, then by all means, yes, you should be carrying out a review of your HACCP. If you've had any incidents, major incidents or non-compliance records, product recalls or withdrawals, or if there's been any food safety incidents in your your sector, so your kind of the brewery industry, just have a look at that and just think, actually, could that happen to us? Let's carry out a review of our HACCP and just make sure that we know it could never happen to us. So even if there's been no changes, you should still be taking this opportunity to carry out a review of your HACCP and make sure that you document it, because like we've already said, on clause 2.14, it does say that you need, of the SALSA standard, and we do say that you need to carry out a review at least annually. So just going through top tips then, if you've got too many CCPs, then it's likely that you're doing your HACCP incorrectly. So make sure that you do follow these HACCP principles that are set out in the legislation. Don't get bogged down in the legislation. It's already written in the SALSA standard. So use what is in the SALSA standard. Make sure you're really confident you're compliant with each clause in the HACCP section, and definitely use the interpretation guide. So generally speaking, when you're producing beer, you probably only have a couple of CCPs. So if you've got kind of 4 or 5, then go back to these principles and just check that you're doing it correctly. So make sure then, on top tips, keep it really simple. Make sure that the person developing the HACCP is trained and that you can show this to your auditor. And if you've got a mentor or a consultant that has helped you with your HACCP, make sure that it's your business. So make sure that you understand the HACCP system. Go through it with your consultant or go through it with your mentor, but make sure that you have a really good understanding of it. You know what's been done and why, and that you've inputted on that. You haven't just left it for someone else to do. You've actually inputted with that, and you've been a part of it. So work through the SALSA standard and use the interpretation guide. I often ask people if they are aware of the interpretation guide and get answered, yes, definitely, we know all about it. But then it's really clear that actually they don't know where it is. So familiarise yourself with it. It's a really useful tool, and it's on the SALSA website. If you remember, you will have access to it. So health and safety is really important, but don't confuse it with food safety. So like I said earlier, with your HACCP, just make sure that you have your HACCP is just in relation to food safety. And again, quality, really important for your beer, but just make sure that quality should be separate from your HACCP. So food safety only in your HACCP. So we're just going to go through the cleaning of kegs now. So again, this is something where we get non-conformances and actions. So ideally, cask cleaning it should be done on the day of use. So if no more than 2 days in advance, and it should be fitted with a keystone and loosely fitting shive. So good practice is to rinse with peracetic acid before use if they've not been cleaned on the day of use. Document a procedure for cask washing. So make sure you've actually got this procedure written down of how you do cask washing, when it needs to be done, and make sure that people are trained on it. The relevant people understand that procedure and are trained on it. Have a system in place to document and trend any casks that are not cleaned effectively first time. And this will help you investigate what is the cause of it. So there might be a really obvious reason for it, but actually we need to have that written in a procedure, that what to do if it hasn't been cleaned first time. Does it need to go through a more thorough soaking period, for example, before it's then washed again? But if you all of a sudden have, if you start trending those casks that aren't cleaned first time, it can tell you a lot about your system and how effective your cask washer is, the operation of it is. So inspection of casks then. So this may be classed as a CCP in your HACCP, may not be, but a thorough inspection of each cask after washing. So we need to do a thorough inspection. And this can be as a visual inspection where you've got your torch and you're doing your torch test, or you could do a sniff to check the smell and the aroma for cleanliness. Consider testing the pH of the final rinse water as well. So you can do that with a pH meter or with a pH test paper. But with all of these, record the results. So we do expect you to be practical though. So we do not expect you to record every time you do a visual inspection. However, on every single cask, but we would expect this to be documented in a procedure, and that people have been trained out to demonstrate that they understand what they need to do and that we can see that it's actually happening. And on the final rinse water, consider what would be the best time frequency to check the pH. So you might start to record this at the start, middle and end of the wash run, for example, just so that you can demonstrate that the cask washing is working correctly. So top tips then. So be pragmatic. So make sure that people understand this cask washing procedure and have the procedure documented and trained out. It's easy to just rewash a dirty cask, but recording failures in the system can give you valuable information. So it can save you time and you can become more efficient then, can't you, to solve if you start to solve these problems rather than just keep washing casks twice. Testing the pH of the rinse water lets you know that your cask washer is doing its job and highlights issues early. And remember, this stage can affect your beer quality and save time that's spent, so responding to unhappy customers. So finished product testing then. So this is the next topic that we're going to go through. So when we think about why do we test then? So we test to ensure good quality beer, which is safe to drink. It provides consistency to your customers, and testing product throughout at the end of shelf life is a due diligence check that verifies label durability and your legal obligation to prove claims are correct. So we all want good quality beer, which satisfies your customers, and we know that, and making sure that it's safe to drink. So if your business makes claims about their products, such as low alcohol or gluten-free on the label, product specifications or websites, then there is a legal obligation for you to be able to prove that your claims are correct. And although beers are inherently buffered against the growth of pathogens due to their alcohol content, there can be acidity or pH level or other quality changes which can arise from poor hygienic practices or poor design of equipment by allowing spoilage organisms to enter your product. So we must remember, though, that any low alcohol beers or will require different safety criteria due to the absence of alcoholic preservation and the addition of other ingredients, which links to your HACCP plan. So these are some of the typical testing parameters that we would be looking for. So thinking about your physical stability, so your hazes and your precipitates, and also the microbiological stability. So microbiological contamination by wild yeasts and mold and a wide variety of bacterial species can cause off flavours and souring of beer. Overcarbonation of beer can have this gushing, a violent eruption of beer from bottles, and serious hazes and gels can form. You could have scums and biofilms in beer. So just to touch a little bit on biofilms. So in simple terms, biofilms, they're kind of a layer that is created, and it allows bacteria to grow and multiply on the surface of equipment, for example. And once you've got a biofilm, it's really hard to remove these biofilms by standard cleaning chemicals. And quite often you need a different style of cleaning chemical which is specific to clean biofilms. So it's about making sure that we're keeping the equipment clean at all times and all surfaces so that these biofilms do not form. So when it comes to internal testing then, we want to think about how you can make life easier for you and your colleagues. Can this information be put on a brew sheet? So brewers are brilliant at creating a brew sheet that's got lots of information on there. So try and put as much information, testing information as you can on your brew sheets. It just means that you've got less paperwork. If you've got an electronic IT system for your brewery, then can you put some of these parameters on there as well? But microbiological, so think about lactic acid bacteria for your spoilage, water testing if you've got a borehole, analytical and sensory, so things like your SG, your pH, and And then your finished goods as well, so your dissolved oxygen, ABV, bitterness, colour, haze, etc. So when it comes to external testing then, we require you to do this annual verification, and that is a SALSA requirement. So what you need to be doing is make sure that you remember to do your ATNC testing and your NDMA testing. And then, do things like your bitterness, your colour, but make sure that make sure that you're doing these testing so that you can comply with HMRC requirements as well. So if you're doing the BFBI module, then salmonella on spent grain is also a requirement, so don't forget about that. But it's important to make sure that any external testing laboratories that you are using are accredited to ISO 17025 or part of the Brewing Analytics Proficiency Testing Scheme, which you might know as BAPS, for all tests that you need to be completed. So if you've got a laboratory on site which is not accredited, ensure that it's part of a proficiency testing. So when we come to external labs then, it's important to make sure that any external labs, like I said, are part of this this ISO 17025 or this BAPS scheme. So check the lab. So it might have a UCAS number as well. So most labs have a UCAS number, which would indicate they're part of this ISO number. But there are, for the brewery industries, which I'm sure you're all aware of, but in case you're not, there's these external laboratories who offer SALSA analysis packages. So Murphy's and Sons have a quality assurance package, and then there's also Brewlab as well. So on those links there, see there's more information on there. So what next then? So make sure that you create some kind of a testing schedule. So it could be internal or external testing. Train operatives on how to carry out these tests, and also train them on what to do if there's any out of specification results. Where do they do a retest? What do they need to do? Where does it get recorded? What action they've taken? So you make sure that you're using calibrated equipment where you are testing for safety or legal parameters, and equipment that kind of make sure that your equipment is routinely checked in-house as well for accuracy. So things like your pH meters, you can be testing those internally in-house using buffer solutions. So validate on-pack claims, such as if you're making any gluten-free claims or low ABV. So when it comes to top tips then, record results through the process. Utilise existing paperwork for recording your results, such as your brew sheets. Set clear parameters, so have these been documented? Are out of specification results acted upon, and have they been recorded, and the actions recorded as well? Because your records should kind of tell a story of what has happened on that day, should you need to refer back to them in the future. And remember that beer flavour is a constant state of change, so deterioration starts once beer is packaged. Hence, it's important to assess the beer quality through the life and to the end of life, as displayed on the packaged product label, which brings me on to shelf life. So shelf life needs to be validated. So it's not acceptable to base your shelf life on what other companies do in the market. So you are expected to establish the shelf life of your products yourself. So where you have a small packed product, such as bottles or cans, it's advisable to retain a packet of these until the end of the shelf life. You're then expected to taste the product to ensure that the quality has not been affected by the shelf life that has been given. When you have carried out this assessment, remember to record the assessment, and so that you can show your auditor that you have carried out this test. And these safe samples can also be a good reference point. So should you receive a customer complaint, you've got some spare samples to refer back to as well. So shelf life of cask beer then. So once broached should be confirmed by shelf life testing. You could do sub-samples, however, these might not be as representative. So it's advisable to carry out shelf life testing annually, as this can tell you a lot about the hygiene of your brewery and help you understand issues before they become bigger issues. So that's just a little bit on shelf life. So top tips then when it comes to shelf life. So create a table of your products. Start with your core range first. If you've got a lot of products, start with your core range first. Casks, so sample these periodically until the end of life, and it's good practice to test these beyond the life as well, because you might be able to extend the life. Record your test results as well. So carry out your organoleptic assessment and for like taste and all your visual parameters as well, but record your test results. So you might use make sure that you use the tasting wheel or the tasting notes for consistency between people that are tasting it, and train the tasters on bitterness levels as well. So when it comes to specifications then, so finished product specifications falls under two clauses. So the first clause is 3.6.1, which says that specifications for recipes and finished products shall be adequate, accurate, and kept current. And 3.6.2, the specifications shall include defined limits for microbiological, physical, chemical parameters, where these may affect the safety and/or quality of the finished product. So specifications falls under two clauses. So although it's important to have your brew sheet with your recipe, a specification is not about giving away your trade secrets. It's about having parameters clearly set out for the product. So on your specification then, so you could have things like obviously the product name, the description, list of ingredients. So are there any allergenic ingredients in there? So list them in bold. What is the volume content? What is the packaging format? What is the shelf life associated storage information, microbiological information such as your ATNC parameters, and chemical parameters such as your pH. Remember to put your ABV on there as well. Now, this can be in the form of what we will call a more traditional specification, where it's a bit similar to what you might get for your raw material specifications. Or it could be a separate specification for each product. But how about keeping it really simple and just put it on a table? So you could do it on a table format with all the relevant bits of information for each product. So top tips then for specifications. So keep it simple. You could do the table format like I've suggested. Don't get bogged down and overthink it. You've got all these results. You do all these things every day. So just, the key things that are relevant to the product, and make sure that they're on the specification. Review specifications as part of your annual review. So we should be reviewing specifications, but make sure you document it somewhere. So you could document it in your HACCP minutes. So you're reviewing your food safety systems as part of your HACCP. You could review your specifications as part of that. Or you could just sign and date the specification itself to say that it's been reviewed and demonstrate that it's been reviewed. Capture any changes to specifications so that you've got a record of this. So have a think about where you would capture that. So again, would you capture it on the table, on the spreadsheet that you do, or would you do it as part of the HACCP meeting minutes, your annual review? Specification format, make sure that it's not just a box ticking exercise for SALSA, but make sure that it's in a format that's a simple way that works for you. So when we think about top tips for success then, so being successful on your audit is about preparation. So not only of your site, but also be familiar with each and every clause in the SALSA standard. Whether your business is going for the main SALSA food and drink standard, or the B or the plus beer standard. So carry out a detailed assessment prior to your audit. And this is where your detailed self-assessment, and this is where it's there to help you. So don't just use it as a tick box exercise because you know that it forms this, forms part of section 3 of your audit, and your auditor is always going to ask for it. But make it user friendly. Make sure that you're doing a good job of it, because you'll find that it's really helpful for you to help your audit run smoothly. So the number of audits that I go to, and the sites haven't raised any issues or very minimal issues as part of the self-assessment, but then the auditors go along and find non-conformances or corrective actions that really should have been picked up by the site if they'd have done a proper job of looking at doing a good self-assessment. So it's your opportunity, your self-assessment is, to iron out or fill any gaps before the auditor comes to the site, so just to help you and your audit run smoothly. You can I know that you're all really busy, and you can have a SALSA mentor that comes to help you, and that's quite useful because it's a fresh pair of eyes. They're asking questions that you perhaps haven't thought about, and they're familiar with the standard. So we see a lot of breweries as well, and food businesses, so we can advise on simpler ways of working which you might not have thought about as well. So top tips for success then. So carry out a detailed self-assessment, and it's recommended that you do this probably about 3 months out from your audit, just to give you time to rectify anything that you're not sure of and time to do it. You don't have to do it all in one go. You could do it over a series of days, or you could do one section every quarter throughout the year. It's set, the audit is 4 different sections, isn't it? So use the interpretation guidance to help you as well. So there's lots of information on there. Already mentioned about the potential of using a SALSA mentor. Remember that there's templates as well on the tools and tips. So again, a lot of people don't kind of refer to the tools and tips, but it's a really useful resource, which if you're a SALSA member, you will have the access to the tools and tips, and they've got templates on there, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Be logical. So when you're having a look at all of the requirements, be logical. Don't get over involved and overcomplicate it. Just stick to the audit standard. And then utilise your brew sheet to reduce the amount of paperwork as well. So this is just a link where you can watch the previous webinars on the YouTube channel, and Sarah Robbins will send you the link out after to these webinars after today. But we hope that you found this really informative and useful. Sarah, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much, Alison. That was really useful. We've now got some time. We've got Alison on the line. We've also got Sarah Hall, our certification manager, on the line. So if anyone has any questions, I would ask that you type them into the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them. As you can see, Alison, if you can see the chat, we do have a question that's been written. Do we need to consider the health effects of excess alcohol consumption in HACCP under vulnerable groups?
I would say not, to be honest with you. So on the vulnerable groups, I would just make sure that you mention who the vulnerable groups are that have, make sure that you mention who the vulnerable groups are. You could mention that, I suppose you could mention actually that the health effects of excessive alcohol consumption within this section. To be honest, I don't normally, when I'm looking at HACCPs. What do you, I don't normally, to be honest. I don't normally. Sarah Hall, what's your view on that? It's probably worth a comment, isn't it?
I must admit, I'm like you, Alison. It's not something that I would have considered.
Yeah,
is it a food safety issue, or is it? I think you could probably argue that any food product could be a risk to, in excessive consumption.
Yeah.
It's not something I've ever seen on another HACCP.
No, I've never seen it on a HACCP, and I don't normally, if I'm working with somebody to prepare a HACCP, I've never put it on there. So yeah, so I wouldn't normally put that on there. You could mention it, but yeah, I wouldn't normally, to be honest with you. I hope that answers your question. But definitely.
Thanks, Alison. And do we have any more questions? If you would prefer to ask, you can unmute, that's fine, rather than put it in the chat. Okay. I do think you must have covered everything, Alison. You've done a very thorough job. As Alison said, this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel early next week. So please do use it as a resource to go back if you have any questions. Obviously, we are available in the office Monday to Friday. But if you use this as a resource, we hope it will be useful to you. Thank you very much, Alison. So here is all our social media accounts. We tend to put all our scheme updates on there and information about upcoming training. We have one more webinar happening this year. It's taking place on the 7th of November. It's about pest control. And so information will be sent out via our social media, and it will be on our website by the end of today if you wish to book. I can see we have another question. Could you mention what details need to be recorded? Oh, hang on, I can't quite read that one. To be recorded of ingredients, i.e. batch numbers and best before dates. Can you see that message, Alison? It's just...
Yeah, let me just have a quick read.
I've got a funny little thing.
No, it's all right. Let me just have a quick read of it. So this is for your traceability, isn't it? So I'm thinking that you mean for your traceability. So when you're recording, so as part, we do have a webinar on traceability actually. So definitely have a look at that. On your brew sheet, I'm assuming you're meaning on your brew sheet, but I'm just going to start quickly from the beginning. So when you have your ingredients come on site, you need to record the date of delivery, what product's been delivered, the batch detail or the best before, whatever is as much information as you can get off there. So batch, best before dates, etc. Yes, you do. When you're putting on your brew sheet, then if you've already recorded, you've already got traceability of what came in on your goods in record. On your brew sheet, you just need to put the batch number or something that can trace it back to what came in. So it depends how your traceability system works, whether you work off batch and best before date. So if a supplier has given a best before date only, then as long as yes, you're fine to put the ingredient and the best before date, because that will link back for you to be able to trace it. But I'll just signpost you, just have a look at our traceability webinar. We've done one on traceability specifically. So I hope that answers your question.
I will, when I send the link to this recording to everyone that's attended today, I will add on the traceability webinar as well, and food defence.
Great.
Okay. Anyone else have any more questions? We've got the time, so if you've got anything that's niggling you, we can hopefully help you out with it. Okay. No.
Or if you want to kind of think about, the other option is, if you can't think of anything now and you do think of it afterwards, then our contact details for the office are there. So please do get in touch, because like Sarah said, we're here to help and offer support. So if you do, if you don't want to put a comment on the chat now in front of everybody, then you've also got that option as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so just to let you know that the next webinar is pest control on the 7th of November. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. Thank you again, Alison, for your hard work. This has been a brilliant webinar and a really useful resource. I think now we will close the session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.